Hello, I'm Michael Duvall, lead pastor of Journey Church. We are a community of faith composed of imperfect people, and we're really trying to center our lives on Jesus. We are so glad that you're worshiping with us online. We hope you'll find today's service to be extremely meaningful as we address some of the concerns that are going on in our country today. I ask that you be praying that this service would somehow touch and guide and direct and help people to connect with Jesus in a life-changing way.
Good morning and welcome to Journey Church. We are so glad that you're here to worship with us online this morning. So gather around your TV screens, your iPads, your computers, because we're getting ready to sing. We're going to wake up with one called Your Love Awakens Me. Y'all join with us. Let's sing together. Come on. Awake out there. All right, we're going to slow it down here, and Abby's going to lead us on one called King of My Heart. Y'all join in as you feel led.
the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, 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 let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, 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 you're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never gonna let me down.
be coming home tonight. Sirens screaming down the avenue. Just another story on the evening news. Politics and prejudice. How in the world did it ever come to this? Well, everybody's gotta pick a side. It don't matter if you're wrong or right, no. So it goes. But I hold on to hope and I won't let go, 'cause I believe you and me are sisters and brothers, and I believe we're made to be here for each other, and we'll never fall if we walk hand in hand. Put a world that seems broken together again, yeah. I believe in the end, love wins. Sometimes it takes a lot of faith to keep believing there will come a day when the tears and the sadness, the pain and the hate, the struggle, this madness will all fade away. 'Cause I believe you and me are sisters and brothers, and I believe we're made to be here for each other, and we'll never fall if we walk hand in hand. Put a world that seems broken together again, yeah. I believe in the end, love wins. Love is a power, love is a smile, love reaches out, love is a remedy, love is the answer, love's an open door, love is the only thing worth fighting for, yeah. Oh, I believe you and me are sisters and brothers, and I believe we're made to be here for each other, and we'll never fall if we walk hand in hand. Put a world that seems broken together again, yeah. I believe in the end, love wins.
Hey, Pastor Charles Wilson here, hanging out today with our family and friends. We just wanted to share a little bit about what's kind of going on in our hearts and what we're feeling, what we're seeing. I don't think we have a specific order or agenda. We just wanted to be honest and transparent. I want to share just a little bit of what's on my heart and what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing. Of course, heartbroken, lamenting, like we all should be with watching the current events, not just the specific incidents, but actually many of the things that are still transpiring. And specifically, speaking from a place as a Christian man who is watching the environments, who loves the Church of Jesus, who wants to have a biblical worldview and how I see the world and how we respond. Roanoke has a history of redlining, of telling people where they can't live. And that's something that is still seen and reflected today. The older generation in our city still feels unwelcome in certain parts of the city, that they shouldn't go downtown, that they shouldn't be a part of different things. And that is something as a Christian, as a church planter, that I can't ignore, right? I can't just preach the gospel and ignore the realities.
I'm Michael Duval. I'm the lead pastor of Journey Church, and I'm so glad, Charles, that you're here with us to share with us today. In this time when racism is plaguing our land, I'm curious if you would share some about your own personal experience of racism and how that's affected your view of the church and your calling from God.
Yeah. So, even before I was aware of it, there were things happening, I guess, in my life that I didn't realize was because of just being an African American. Some of the early things as a teenager, I do remember racial profiling. I grew up in New Jersey, and there was a long stretch of time there where racial profiling was a reality. And I remember getting pulled over time after time, and being spoken to by police officers in a very unfriendly manner. But it became a way of life for me, and I just expected it. And I didn't realize I was being conditioned to accept it, that there are times where I would be targeted over other people and I would be looked at. And so eventually it's something I had to teach my own sons. We have 2 boys. Our oldest would be 22, our youngest would be 19 next month. And having that conversation with our boys was another one of those realities where we had to share with them, you'd be in the car with your friends and you'll probably be isolated out as the only African American in that car.
And how hard was that for you to have a conversation with your sons about that?
It wasn't hard, but only because I felt like they didn't get it at the time. I think they thought I was just talking, because their reality, they for the most part, they've only had glimpses of things in school where kids would say you're dirty and you can't get clean, or that you can't come over to my house. My younger son, they had a vote in elementary school on who would be president, and I remember majority of the kids voted for President Barack Obama, and it was a children elementary school election, and his friend said, you can never come over to my house because of who you voted for. And my kid came home laughing and confused. I knew what he meant, and his friend knew exactly what his parents would think of my son. And so it was hard at the time in elementary school to communicate to my son what that meant just because of that in school.
I'm having trouble finding the words to talk today about what's going on in our culture, in our nation. And what occurred with George Floyd has ignited in many people fear and anger and bewilderment. And as I've tried to think through this as a follower of Jesus, the image that's come to my mind again and again is of one policeman who had his knee down on a man whose skin was darker, but I've been envisioning that was Jesus that knee was down on. And the governmental authorities ended his life. As an Anglo male, it's hard for me to comprehend what that might mean for people of color. And my predominant emotion at this point is just intense sadness and grieving. But other people have other experiences. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
So I would say it would almost be the opposite, in a sense where I'm not surprised. I'm not looking even at this incident like it's the most grotesque incident. That for me, it's all right, it's another day, and it's recorded, people see it. We're angry, frustrated, heartbroken, saddened, and next week it's almost like the expectation is next week we'll see this again. And I guess the other side of it, where some of the frustration and anger comes, is when it's brought up or when someone tries to highlight it. It's almost like, even from my Christian brothers and sisters, it's almost a yelling of, what are you talking about? Why, that isn't true. That doesn't exist. We shouldn't, stop focusing on that. That's not anything to focus on. And the parallel there would be, Colin Kaepernick, as he is saying, okay, I'm going to kneel because I want to bring attention to police brutality. And for the majority of people would say, you are being disruptive, you're disrespecting our troops, which is a whole weird argument because it has nothing to do, his whole platform had nothing to do with the troops. But that kind of goes back to a whole nother thing where the association there came from, but he's not communicating that. He's saying, I want to bring attention to that. And it's, and you have from the highest levels of leadership, people saying, don't do that. And then you have people in the culture who want to, you know, rally and do different things, and it's like, don't do that. And so it's all right, so don't do peaceful things. It's basically saying, just shut up about it. Just shut up, don't talk about it, don't bring it up, just ignore it, be hurt in silence. I remember when the police shootings happened in Dallas, and right before that, when they were showing video after video of different gentlemen being shot, and just the pain on my wife's face and the tears in her eyes, because she's thinking, I have an African-American husband, I have African-American sons, and there is absolutely nothing. There is no one defending them. The people who are assigned to protect them actually have the authority to take their lives. And for many of them, there was no justice, there was no accountability, and there was no prison time for many of them. And so just hearing that over and over, and then you get, even with this argument, as we watch some of the news, it's people are saying, well, he died from other things. And so the first autopsy comes back and says that there was something. Then the second autopsy comes back and says, no, he was strangled, he was choked to death. But even people who are trying, it's almost like, again, there's this wiggle room of saying, well, it isn't first-degree murder if he died from something else. And it's almost like you don't care about humans, because you're trying to like take the air out of an argument that you feel as though is against you, and it's just a little frustrating there. And then when I hear that, because you know, sometimes I read the comments, when I hear that from people who I know or would say they love Jesus and would say they care about all people and would jump on airplanes and go to foreign countries to spread the gospel, but to hear that type of stuff is very hurtful. So when I see an officer on top of a man, the man dies, and he's there for like 3 more minutes after the man is dead, still there, the image in my mind is, again, here we go again, and I can almost set my clock for the next one, is the initial thought.
I grew up where my parents stayed together, but both of my parents were alcoholics. And their perceptions of racial relationships were very different. And so I got very mixed messages growing up. You talked about redlining and the different communities. I grew up in a small community where literally the other side of the tracks did divide the housing for people who were African American from Anglo American. Yeah. And one did not really cross the tracks back in those days, except for my dad, who was a friend of whom we call Big Mike. His name was Mike Pulliam. Mike was an African-American man who was a handyman. He could fix things, and we could not. And from my dad, I got the message, well, it's Big Mike. No different, just Big Mike. And so when he would come fix things, if it would be hot outside, he'd be invited in by my dad and, you know, have a glass of water. But if my dad was not there, the different message from my mom was, Big Mike couldn't come in the house. He had to sit on the back steps. And so even within racial groups, there's a significant difference of perceptions in doing that. And I found that confusing as a young person. I imagine like your kids, it's just confusing in how that all happens. You and I have many similarities. We're husbands, and we're dads, and we're pastors, and we're males, and we have things that are in common. We have some things that are different about us, but what is crucial is our identity in Christ. And it seems that this division in our country oftentimes is related to, we've lost that sense of the other, rather than the image you used, we're part of the family of God because we're created in the very image of God.
Yeah. When we go to our family reunion, right? We all have that weird cousin who does something, but
I am the weird cousin.
Right. So, and no one goes, our weird Mike can't come, right? Mike, no, man, how you been? We got stories, you still, drink Kool-Aid, like you still eat pickles and dip it in mustard, all the weird things you do, you're still, none of that should exclude you from being part of the family. And it is uncomfortable, but we're not called to be people that are of comfort. Like if we can understand jumping on an airplane and going into a foreign country to share the gospel with people. How can we not get that even in our context? It's because we want the lazy, easy way out. We want everyone to look like us and talk like us and think like us. We don't want the nuance. We don't want anything that kind of ruffles our feathers. And so what we do is we just slam down and say, this is the line here, and you need to start conforming and coming over here. We want our weird cousin to dress like us. We don't want you. And that isn't how Jesus did it. Jesus pressed in to the woman at the well, who even her own cultural context would have pushed her out because of her history and her background. And Jesus pushed in, and then he used her to be an evangelist. I mean, that is not the way the church does it. The church, we do it differently. We want her to be cleaned up and for her to look like us and talk like us and drink like us and do everything. And now you can be an evangelist. And Jesus pushed always, he made the hero of the story the person they hated the most. He made the hero the Samaritan, and then he made the villain the religious person, because the religious person stepped to the other side when the Samaritan, think about this picture. The injured person, you got the religious person, you got the Levite who steps to the other side. And you get the Samaritan who, to them, this is an atrocity that he's using them as the hero. The Samaritan did not say, what did you do to be in this situation? Never asked the question. Jesus doesn't put that in the story. He doesn't say, well, maybe you did this and you deserve that. Never asked those questions. Picked them up, cleaned them up, bandaged them up. Then he took them, put them in the inn, and he said to the innkeeper, listen, if there's any more things that come up, if his bill goes any higher, let me know, because when I come back, I'll take care of it. That is over and beyond before he even engaged in conversation with him. And this is what we're missing, when we see these images of someone's knee on someone's throat. We're going, well, what did he do first? So we're waiting for the footage, right? I have great friends who are missionaries who their number one line is, well, I've learned to wait to see the rest of the footage. Like, we can't lament the fact that a man is dead here. We can't lament the fact that a mom has to bury her son because he went out jogging, and we're waiting to see the rest of the footage, but the people who killed him have gone home for the next 2.5 months to go sleep in their bed and play with their kids. She's already had her funeral before it even hits the day of light. We can't lament that. We still need to wait a little more time before we even mourn with those who are mourning. Like, that is just simple Christianity. Mourn with those who are, stop asking questions. What did he do? Why did he deserve it? Mourn with those who are mourning. Period. There is no, unless the guy who's in the ditch did something to deserve it, then do like the Levite did, or do like, the religious leader did. And so, yeah, that to me, I think this is what I mean when I say I feel as though there's a large group of people who've just walked away from the gospel that we cherish. That mourn with those is mourning is simple. Love your neighbor is just simple, basic, some of the first chapters in the gospel. It isn't the deep stuff at the end in Revelation. This is like chapter 1, the Beatitudes, like, the poor and those who are hungry. And so, yeah, I'm wrestling today with that as a gospel-loving man of God, and listening to the rhetoric and watching the church step away from people, and be afraid to step to people or closer.
The challenge of racism for younger people today, whether they be African American or Anglo American, who are seeking to live the Jesus way, is they perceive a hypocrisy that is turning them away from God, when it is the false righteousness of those of us who have not heard and lived out the gospel. Yeah. And I think, Charles, that in the American church, we sometimes lose that sense of, it's not all about me, but it's caring for those who are in need, like you said, as a good Samaritan. And how does one balance that with, there are times to be humble and meek, but then there's this sense of anger that Jesus experienced when there was wrongdoing and oppression and taking advantage of and exploiting people? Charles, we've been witnessing protests around the world, in our country, in our community. I am a person who believes there is significant value in peaceful protest movements to communicate a message clearly in the public realm when wrongs are being done. We're seeing a variety of protests now, many of which are peaceful, and I personally support them in a significant way so that injustice can be confronted and authorities can be held accountable. And yet, I'm concerned about when protests move toward violence and looting. That's my perspective.
I definitely agree. I think people need to voice. I think there needs to be an outlet. I think a demonstration is really what it should be, a demonstration that people are upset and frustrated. I think there's a way of us ignoring things until it gets the appropriate attention sometimes. And so we've seen it in the past where it's helpful, where it's gotten the attention of people. We've seen it in the past where it's escalated to, burnings and violence and crime and all types of different things. And so as a person who, as a pastor, so I struggle with the fact that I care for everyone's safety and I don't want no one hurt, but I also want people to yell and be angry and tell people this is wrong, this needs to stop. And I believe in speaking truth to power. I believe, just as the prophets of old who would stand before the king who was out of line with the Lord and say, you are wrong. When that king has the ability to kill them, that there is power in that, where the person is saying, I know I'm putting myself on the line. I'm putting myself out here. And in our culture today, all it takes is one video or someone seeing you out there and you can be fired from your job in ways that wouldn't have happened before. And so I do understand anger, frustration, and I understand an environment that is charged for trouble. So yeah, I am 100% on board. I think there needs to be a voice, but at the same time, we have to understand that when we do gather because of charged events, that there is a high potential of something happening, and it's just part of it. So we can't say we're with peaceful protests knowing there is nothing but anger and frustration and confusion in the hearts of so many people. And then of course we have people who have no good intention, and they didn't even come because of the issue. They just came because they want to incite something. And then as a person who loves clarity, I'm trying to win over my brother and sister who's not listening to the conversation. And now all they're going is, see, this is why. And so the looting now takes center stage and no longer is the loss of life important. Now, and I'm not even saying that's for everyone, but I do know that there's a demographic of people who will not talk about nothing but the looting now. And they have never talked about the death. And I wish they would even look at their timeline and go, you know what? I've written 5 posts about the looting, but I've never said we need to lament the loss of life ever when these incidences happen.
Because they're 2 separate events.
They're completely 2 separate events, yeah. And we're smart enough to go, yeah, this has nothing to do with that. But if we want to, if we don't want to, then we can go, all right, we're just going to look at this. And I will say this, as a Christian man who reads the Bible, who understands evil in this world, I am not confused. I am not bewildered by the reality that people hate other people. As a black man, I am completely aware that there are people who see me and automatically categorize me. I've just lived through life that way, understanding it. That I have to explain myself when I enter a room, that I have to explain that I'm safe, that I have to be aware of the people around me, that I have to be aware of where I'm at, even throughout the city, if I'm in the county or somewhere else, that I need to communicate, I feel the need to communicate something. And so I understand that. I understand that part, and I don't feel like I need to expect a utopia or some place where this never happens. The only area where I get frustrated is the church, because I do expect A, B, C, or D. The world is the world, and it's going to do its thing, and I'm not confused by that, but I am confused when I see it in a space where I'm supposed to be a part of with my brothers and sisters, and then I experience those same things.
I'm a little confused by it. I hear you're not. I'm upset about it. I get angry about it. And my experience is different than yours, because most of the time I don't feel unsafe in moving about the community. I have experience having worked in the realm of law enforcement, engaged in Christian ministry as a prison chaplain. And I learned during that experience from just a wonderful Christ-like woman. Her name was Jency Fields. Jency happened to be African American. And she would say to me, because I was young, I was 22 years old, and she would say, Michael, there are good people and bad people in this prison. There are good people who are African American, and there are good people who are Anglo American. There are bad people who are African American and bad people who are Anglo American. And then she'd say, and there are good people and bad people who work in law enforcement. She did not see it as everybody is bad, everybody is good. We all have the potential to do good or bad things. But she was candid with me when I first started in the law enforcement realm. There are many people who are wonderful, but there are other people who have different motives, who choose to do things that are evil. Right. And I think when I say confusing, sometimes it's still hard for me to wrap my head around people who are supposed to protect others indeed bring hurt to people. And I think that is one of the things, particularly for young adults, they're trying to figure that out and how to deal with the emotional anger over that.
And that's where I find hope. I find hope right where there's that tension. If there was no confusion or frustration or anger, then I would be saddened. But you know, we see these things and we go, that's not right. And until we get to a place where we go, that's normal, and yeah, police kill people for no reason, that's where I go, all right, we're in trouble. But I think for the most part, most people, I would guess at this point, most people look at injustice and go, it's unjust. Now, we have different views on how we solve it and fix the problem, but I think we still live in a place where we go, that isn't right, that shouldn't have happened. And that's what I'm excited for young people, because they see those things and they go, it isn't right and it shouldn't happen. But I don't want them to lose hope. And I know a lot of young African American people who are finding themselves a little hopeless and a little bewildered because they believe that there is no hope and that there is no answer and that this is just the way it's always going to be. And so they're giving up on trying. I'm just wired a little different. I believe we should be continuously working towards solving problems, addressing things, and intentionally making things uncomfortable so we can have a full conversation and not just trying to quiet everything down, but to just become more used to having hard conversations where we should definitely encourage versus just try to quiet everything down and just bring silence.
When you speak of hope, I think back to Jency, my friend. And I think if we can approach one another as brothers and sisters in Christ, even though we may have some ethnic differences. One of the most honoring experiences I've had in my life is, tragically, Jency's husband was killed in an accident when I was a chaplain there. And she asked me to be one of the pallbearers. I was pretty much the only Anglo person at this funeral. But I had the privilege of doing that. When you talk about hope, I think that gives me hope that people who may have had the experience of discrimination and prejudice are the norm. Right. That's what we grew up with. When we come to follow Jesus, that can change. And that's the hope that I have for those of us who are followers of Christ. And I think somehow we need to get that message out that more clearly, and we need to listen to one another's stories, and we need to take actions to engage in justice ministries or justice actions so that it becomes concrete and not just words.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I would say, to be honest about, is that the church has historically, most of the major denominations have, written repentance over the last 15 years of just their part in racism or slavery and things like that. And I think, it's important when we talk about lamenting, we definitely have to think through the history, where we are, how we got here, what have we been ignoring, so that we don't keep making the same mistakes. If we don't, and if this goes back to being normal and we just kind of go back to life, it's kind of like the virus, right? Everyone can't wait to get back to normal life. And I think there's just a lot of sweet things in here that the Lord wants to teach us to make us better people before we get back to normal life. But if we get back to normal life, then we would have punted again at a time where we have a beautiful opportunity to stop, lament, look at the message young African Americans are hearing. Don't peacefully protest. Don't say anything. Look at these riots. And all they're hearing, if you just take a few seconds to think about that, all they're hearing is shut up and don't say anything. Because if you kneel at a football game, you're against the troops. If you assemble peacefully, you're going to cause riots. If you speak up and make everyone uncomfortable, you're just a bad person. And think about how confusing that would be even for a Christian person who understands justice and what justice really looks like. That Jesus did not quiet his mouth. He spoke out against injustice and against the religious leaders who were out of step. And then he stood before the king and he said, listen, the most powerful person who wants to take his life. And he has this clear picture of the more important thing, that giving in to what's wrong or sin, like Satan tried to tempt him to, in the midst of a kingdom that's limited, all right? The person who put him on the cross had a limited kingdom, but Jesus was extending to all of us an eternal kingdom that we can be in that has no expiration date. And this is where I get hope, is because I'm a part of that. And that I am in the midst of a time where there is broken and inequity, and that I want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. But in the midst of doing that, I get to address these things for all people.
And candidly, I want to be very hopeful. And yet, I lived through the late 1960s with the assassination of Dr. King and the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and the race riots and the burning of the cities in the inner core. And I want to be hopeful, Charles. But in some ways, this is a replaying. Yeah. As you talked about, you have a sense, well, this is just not new. I'm praying first to look inside myself to see if there's any way I'm contributing to the problem. And I want to engage in meaningful dialogue with people of what are some concrete ways we can address this. In many ways, for younger folks, I've got children, you've got children, that there would be a transformed world where we would see one another as being in the image of Christ. And yes, we have some differences, but we need to be unified and work together and be able to express our fears and our anger, because whenever we're threatened, that's what we feel. And I feel some degree of threat for the future of our world, but my response is mostly fear. But I hear you saying the response of many people is just anger. What do you suggest folks do with that stuff?
I believe, and this is where I know a lot of young people are frustrated, I believe every day we should be working in these areas. Now, those contributions can be small, like the relationship you had with the lady in the prison. She's shaping your worldview. And I mean, that's a contribution that's helped you on your course of just how you view the world. And sometimes I know younger people want to see bigger, wider, right now things. If this is the day you begin working towards things and seeing things, you're late. And there are different people who are on the highway. Some are just getting on the lane. Some are speeding along because they've been on the highway for a while. And that's where I get a little nervous with this conversation, because I don't want to scare the person who's just getting on and experiencing this conversation, because they're going to exit off the next exit and go, that's just too hard and it's uncomfortable. I want them to speed up a little bit and get in step with everyone else. which means, you have to inform yourself, you have to read, you need to know, why things are before you just say, well, those people are there because they are lazy or they chose to be there, but you don't know the history of why they got there.
Charles, I'm aware of a number of people, most of whom have very good hearts, who are concerned because they're not sure what to say or how to say it, if it'll be misperceived or it would offend people.
I think we definitely need to attack that excuse. I think some of that to me can be, and I know a lot of African Americans are looking at that as that's almost kind of a self-preserving. Again, it's another way of just kind of hiding out. If it was something very important to you, it wouldn't be that hard of a thing to address. If it was a family member, you would find a way to get in there, and you wouldn't be as concerned. You probably will say the wrong thing. You probably will offend someone. If you aren't putting in the work to pick up some books like Letters to a Birmingham Jail and reading through some of these arguments and things to see even how the Christian community was struggling through these things, then yes, you just want the easy way out. And I'll give you 5 ways to address racism in America, and to have an easy way of getting through that. It doesn't exist. Like if there was one, we'd all learn it in 3rd grade. It is complex. It is hard. I have friends who say, should I say African American or black? Well, the answer is, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to. Someone finds that offensive. Someone else doesn't find it offensive. I don't find either one offensive. My wife finds, if you call me black, offensive. And we come from very similar backgrounds, very similar family structures, very similar areas, and we both view that differently. I know a Southern person who says black in a way that does sound a little bit like they're suggesting something, but I know that their heart isn't suggesting anything. And so one of the ways of addressing that is asking the question. You can't do that if you're not in a relationship and you're not in proximity. Like, that is the key right there, is to be in proximity with people that you can ask those questions, to have relationships, real relationships. My great-grandmother was born in 1913 in Georgia, who had the Ku Klux Klan marching down her street, where her father would send her and her brothers and sisters in the backyard with the animals, and they would watch them go down the street, and she would get beat up by kids, couldn't go past 6th grade, was the most amazing Christian I ever met before in my life. She instilled in me a sense of not preferring one person over another. Like, her Christianity was she didn't go to seminary, but she had the clearest understanding of what it meant to be a Christ follower. And hatred did not shape that, or being mistreated or not being able to get an education didn't shape that. That she had crystal clear perception and understanding of what it meant to walk out Christianity, even in the midst of pain, hatred, and it wasn't unbalanced. That's what shapes me as a believer and gives me hope. If she would have poured into me hatred and I can't believe white people did this, or the Ku Klux Klan, that would have shaped me in a way that would have been wrong. Now I'm free to engage in relationships and give people the opportunity to shape that. And so proximity is key.
I think being silent in the midst of this tragedy and this opportunity is one of the things that I'm concerned about, because being silent in and of itself sends a message.
Yeah, I do think and I know a lot of people who feel as though people who are being silent are part of the problem. I know a lot of young people who are very frustrated when they're not hearing things like this happen from their pastor during this time, where, it's kind of like what's happening with the virus, where we're just, all right, we're picking up in chapter 3 of John today, and the world's on fire. And it's like, wait a minute, Pastor, how should I be thinking? What is the biblical worldview of this thing here? Do you even care, or are you just afraid to say the wrong thing? And we have to be courageous. We can't, it's back to that wanting everything to just work perfectly and no one being loud. It's like, no, you're in the business of being courageous for Christ. We're in the business of trying to touch people, to reach people. We're ministers of reconciliation. Like, that is our job. That isn't something that we kind of do. We are all ministers of reconciliation, and it is our work. And so, yeah, don't feel the need to be quiet. Read, research, Don't just say anything, because that could be harmful too. Remember, we're in a very charged, critical environment where almost anything you say is going to be misinterpreted. And so we're going to have to get over that, because people are going to criticize you either, no matter what you say or you don't say. And this is a complete transparency, as a black man who loves Jesus, who feels the need sometimes to make sure, my evangelical friends feel safe with just my handling of the scripture, and that I'm not just being reckless, and I always feel as though I have to sometimes appease them. I'm becoming far more comfortable with trying to do the right thing than to make people happy. Because I don't think I'll go crazy trying to make everyone happy, and I think I need to be faithful to him and then apologize if I do make a mistake. But my attempt is to honor my Father, to honor my Lord in a way that helps those who need help without feeling as if I can't.
Because having a Jesus-like heart as the motivation is what's crucial. We all will misspeak on occasion. And as Charles, think about what good can come from this tragedy. I'm struggling with that a little bit, but I'm pretty clear about one thing, and that is, the word that comes to my mind is intentionality. Because this is a crisis, but crisis is also the possibility for an opportunity to move forward in some way. And so we all have experienced various things, but let's at least have Jesus-like hearts to have these conversations and say, yes, we're different in some ways, but it is Christ who unites us. And let's clearly, forthrightly address when evil takes place. Let's at least agree on that.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Just my natural wiring, I'm optimistic. The glass is more than half full, the way I look at everything. I do think an awful lot of good is going to come from this. I think from I don't think we're going to just get past this one. I think this is one that's going to change for a lot of people. 6 months from now, this will be on the minds and hearts of people. I believe that personally. I think the church is going to be better because of this. I think some relationships are going to be challenged because of this. I think in a good, healthy way. I really believe the Lord's going to use this in a way to get the attention of people who are privileged to not pay attention. They don't have to think about this, but now it is jumping in on your timeline. It is on your TV. Now your 3-year-old knows about what's happening. You can't avoid it. You can't hide. You can't close the blinds and just say that it's night outside. You have to deal with reality. We all do. And now what we do with that, I believe, is really going to be the thing that tells us in 10, 15 years from now where we really are as a people.
I'm hoping that we will embrace both biblical justice and biblical love, which really can't be separated if we're following the gospel. Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
We really hope that today's service was meaningful to you. If there's some way that we might connect with you as a church, we would love to do that. You can send us an email, you can text to us, you can Facebook message us, you can put something in the comment section. We would like for you to experience the love and care that we have at Journey Church. Besides connecting, you might want to consider contributing. We invite you to give financially to support the life-changing ministries of Journey Church. You can go to our website, journeyconnection.com, to find how to do that, and you can text in. There are a multitude of ways. Know that as you contribute, we partner with a variety of groups and ministries in our community to try to spread the love of Jesus. And one of our ministry partners is the Hill Church, where Charles Wilson is pastor. We're delighted that we have the opportunity to minister alongside them. If there's some way that we can pray for you, we invite you to let us know of that. We have a prayer team that will faithfully remember you in their prayers. Or if there's some other need that you have, that we can be the love of Christ to you at Journey Church, just let us know. Again, thanks so much for worshiping with us today. God bless you.
We are so glad that you have been here for our service. We hope it's been a blessing to you. We're going to close with one called Do It Again, so you all join on in.
Oh, yeah.
for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet.
Oh, your promise still stands.
Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again.
Jesus, you're still enough.
Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again.
Oh, yes, it will.
Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness.
You never failed me yet, and I never will forget. You never failed me yet, and I never will forget.
Amen and amen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope this service has been a blessing to you. And if you would like to connect with us online this week, we sure would love that. If you have a prayer need or any kind of need, we are at journeyconnection.com, so you can just log on there, and there's lots of information there. There's also lots of information in the comments section as we've been going along. So if you want to scroll back, you can find lots of information in the comments section as well. Guys, we love you so much. We miss you so much. We can't wait to see you guys again. So make sure next week you'll bring a friend. You tag a friend. You share with a friend. Yes, just host a watch party with a friend. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with a friend. And so we encourage you to do it. We'll see y'all next week. Y'all have a good one.